work for Microsoft to show
Well,
if it was truly coming along in the sort of emergent conversation. And you're saying that they haven't done enough.
Well, I'm not really saying no. I'm not saying that they haven't done enough. I'm saying that their priorities are different. Like they're a very large corporation. They do develop quite a lot of interesting software, and like I mean I can't fault them for that. The problem, like I mean, like it's great that they're creating like this really like interesting ecosystem with like lots of tie-ins, lots of interchangeability, like that I find interesting. What I don't like is that you have no control over it. Like you can't see what's going on. You have, like there's regularly like security practices that are terrible. Apparently, if you want to develop anything on the like home screen of, or like if you want to develop what is it the start menu on a Windows computer, the code around it is like 30 years old, and it's awful. And this is one of the reasons why it's such a bloated program, like the Microsoft Windows operating system. Like I think it takes like 25 gigs just to install it. I think some of the installations of Linux that I've seen like a really decked out one is like maybe 8. Like like
Yeah.
yeah, so it's kind of I think it's not so much that they're not like good, and that they're not like good enough. I think it's just that their priorities are to expand and just like kind of like crush their competitors. And Linux is right now, it doesn't have a lot of the market, although for servers and for the internet, like I mean pretty much the entire internet is running on Linux. Like the majority of servers that run the internet are Linux. So it's kind of like for industrial purposes, I don't think that they're, I mean, like I don't know what their market share is, but I do know that for consumers, they're winning by and large. Like there's no like competition really there. Like consumer Linux is still it's coming along, but it's not quite there yet.
Yeah, but of course it will come, right? And that's how the slow growth kind of operates. And then all of a sudden it just is. And so what I'm noticing then is that, yeah, so there's like these attempts of integration, but there's different conversations where different actors essentially need to catch up with each other. And
Mm-hmm.
the way that I see what's going on in the open source world too, having only just started learning about it really, really meaningfully in the last, like, we'll say 6 months or so. Like I did some dabbling in coding and whatnot before and tried to teach myself some web development, got to certain stages of it. But yeah, I'm noticing though that it seems that open source is at a point where it's sort of sitting at the table in a more holistic way, which is great. Um, and and also we've got like billions of people around the world learning to code, or there will be,
Mm-hmm.
and which is gonna. And so what I'm hearing is that um, it's sort of like um, both worlds are sort of contributing.
Yeah.
But the time of sort of open source is certainly on the horizon, which is excellent news, I think. And it seems like the adjustments aren't necessarily enough on the side of Microsoft, but are sort of coming along. And then there still needs to be additional shows of support for the emergence, right? Not just like they have to be sort of like watched as they take steps in these ecosystems to make sure that it's not the same spirit as in the past, right?
Yeah.
Not the same as like expand and then
Yeah. Expand and
remove,
extinguish. Yeah.
right? Like, don't we know that about the story about capitalism, right?
Yeah, but I mean, but the thing is, like, they are a capitalist like corporation. Like that is like there's no way around it. Like they're not gonna like like make a whole bunch of like changes internally and then say, you know what, we're not gonna worry too much about this quarter's like like profits. Like
No, no, no. But
that's not what's gonna happen. And that's why, and then, I mean, like you can see the same thing happening with like with other like major corporations that are built on like on platforms. Like I mean, if you look at like if you can look at Facebook, you can look at Alphabet and like all of its little like like tendrils. And yeah, no, like I mean, ultimately that is like what's going on. That is the like the competition right now is like who can build the better like all-encompassing kind of like software ecosystem. And yeah, no, I mean, like it's just that is like, I mean, they can, everyone can be using open source because it's just the licensing allows you to do that. Unless there's a very specific type of licensing that doesn't let you do that. But
Mhm.
yeah, no, I think ultimately, uh, I think the worry for people for like Linux and like for people who use Linux in the future is like, they don't like Linux right now. I mean, it's headed by the Linux Foundation, and on the board of that foundation is I believe Microsoft is now on the board as of last month, as well as a couple other like really very large corporations, and their kind of personal ideas. I mean, they like, they're not their personal, but their corporate kind of like goals are going to have some sway on, like, the some of the directions that like Linux in general will move towards.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it's kind of like it's a lot of the people who develop it and use it on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, no, they need to be aware of that, and they need to know like when it might be they might need to jump ship or find a new or find a new software, or fork the Linux kernel, and then
Classic.
create their own corporation, like, and that's fine, like you can do that, you're allowed. Yeah,
Right, and
no,
so that's where the unstoppable nature of things comes in, right? And that's why it's good though that people within that shareholding class seem to be paying attention. But on that level, however, it's also great that the people like you, and all of the programmers and stuff,
I
everybody
mean,
stays on top of the information as it changes.
yeah,
But
well,
not just you, many others. I've heard very similar, like not the same information, but very similar perspectives in my research, and it's fascinating. But okay, so we should try to wrap it up. This has
sure.
been a great conversation. I feel like we could keep going.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. Well, I mean, I could go for yeah, I could go for a little bit longer. One
okay.
thing, but before we wrap up, I wanted to say, I said earlier that you can, like, like developers can live off donations, but I mean, like, no, that's not really true. I mean, that's how I wish it were to be. There's definitely examples of like open source based companies and like groups that will they exist by largely providing support for open source software. And so that, like, one shiny example is the Red Hat corporation. So they're kind of they're a corporation that, like, they have their own version of Linux. They have their own suite of software, and they maintain like, I mean, they provide like enterprise level support for a lot of corporations, like they handle kind of like their internet, like their servers. Yeah, and
But
like
by enterprise, you just mean any organization. By corporation, you mean it could be any organization, right? It doesn't need to be like
Mhm.
a big
Yeah, well,
big
I
one. It
mean,
could be a
well,
small business.
it's just that their solutions are more targeted at companies of like 500 to thousands of employees. So I
Okay,
mean, this is
fascinating.
kind of like what they and so they have like an entire ecosystem. They will work, like, I mean, they develop their own software based on open source, and then I think after 6 months to a year, they make that free for everyone, and that's on another operating system which is really tied to it. And I think it's called the Sentry operating system, like
The what?
CentOS. Yeah, so that's kind of
CentOS.
like,
Interesting.
yeah, so it's like Red Hat, CentOS, and I think there's one more I can't remember, but anyway, they're all kind of like they're all related to Red Hat, the corporation. So it's kind of yeah,
Fascinating.
it's interesting. There's ways you can still be, like, you can still like operate in capitalism, and be open source. That's kind of I just wanted to say that, because if you live off donations, you sometimes you'll starve. So
I agree. I agree that you can. I agree because like the free market sort of structure, quote unquote, as it exists, you can do much within alternative methods of work,
mhm.
even within that same context.
Yeah.
It can be a little bit more complex at first, but just like every other sort of kernel, you can copy and paste once it's developed, right? You can just copy and paste what works because as it's tested, we find out what works. And so what I'm hearing is then is there work to be done to support smaller businesses that are smaller than 500 employees, or is that also being sort of facilitated after the 6 months? You were saying that you can get sort of free access to programs often after in the
Well,
within
no,
those
that I
environments?
think. Well, I mean, like every